Calling the roll, Mr. Strawn.
Here?
Mr. Harrison. Mr. Harrison is absent. Mr. Greenspan.
Here.
Mr. Germana.
Here.
Ms. Simon. Here. There is a quorum.
Has everybody, anybody entered requesting comment on the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
Very good. We've got approval of the minutes from the July 13th meeting. Did everybody have a chance to look at those?
Wait, yeah, Mr. Chair, I was here.
You were here? Were you cognizant?
Mr. Kelly's gonna text me. I was here.
1 week ago was when we talked about the jet.
Oh,
I didn't think you were here for that.
no, I was not here for that one, I'm sorry.
We've been moved. I'll second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. The minutes are approved. If we can read into the record the one item that we've got.
Resolution number 2015-0139, a resolution adopting the 2015 Economic Development Plan in accordance with Section 7.05 of the Cuyahoga County Charter and Section 801.01 of the Cuyahoga County Code, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Thank you. Is there anybody here that's prepared to talk about this? I assume that Mr. Kelly is. And if you could also incorporate, because I think he copied you on it, Mr. Miller had made some suggestions and comments, and you can, if you can incorporate those into your update, I would appreciate it.
I'll be glad to, Mr. Chair. Janine, I've got a mind-blowing presentation, if you'd share that. Thank you. May I begin?
Huh?
All right. Mr. Chairman and committee, at our last committee meeting, let me begin with an overview of today. My intent is to go through very quickly what we did at our last committee meeting, and then to talk a little bit about what has happened since our committee meeting. At our first committee meeting, I committed to going into the detail on some of the changes that were programmatic, that are proposed in the Year 5 Economic Development 5-year plan. And then I want to use that opportunity to collect any additional feedback to the committee. In between those two last steps, I'll share with you on the record some of the feedback that I received from Councilman Miller. We had a detailed conversation afterwards. And I'll do my best to not misrepresent his feedback, but it's also been shared with the committee in print.
Yeah, everybody has a copy of his bullet points that he provided to you, along with the rationale for those 4 bullets. So everybody up here has that.
Got it.
Thanks.
So to start, we reviewed 2 weeks ago-ish, on the 7th of June, we reviewed where we are today in the prior 4 years of the Economic Development Plan and activity. Mike May, who is here with us and is our development administrator, reviewed the programs, the funding sources, and the many activities that we do and our approach. We talked about some of those objectives that have been consistent for the Economic Development Plan, but also for the Development Department, around how we pursue, with whom we work, and two important things, how we strive to make sure that the incentives that we provide, usually through subsidized loans or through sometimes forgivable loans, to create jobs. We talked about some of those results, notably over the past 4 years, more than 3,000 jobs created. This is an important distinction because it isn't something that we, wave and hope for in the wind. These are contracted. Businesses commit to making these jobs, so in many cases, the job creation numbers exceed those. And if we are correct in our assertions that the funds that we provide are what we anecdotally call but-for money, but for the county's investment, this deal wouldn't have happened, then but for at least about 3,400 positions were created new to the county. Jobs retained are a little bit, it's a significant number, but we don't try to propose deals for retention. We propose deals for growth. We share that number. We also, I think an important distinction is the cost of job created to the county is less than $13,000 a year. That is about a third of the federal benchmark. If you're using federal funds, look to be, the cost is usually higher, about $3,500, $3,600, $36,000 a year. My commitment is to not completely misappropriate zeros for the rest of this presentation. And these loans were all in these verticals that were familiar to us. We've seen these through different presentations and different economic development plans. And so the work of the development team has been aggressive and significant, especially since 2011. We've created, with council's help, a series of programs and resources that didn't exist prior to the county charter. One of the action items from year 4 was to deliver the county planning also presented at our last meeting the framework that identified some areas for elaborating in detail around place-based economic development. And that was part of the presentation. I won't go through it again. I'm pretty well versed in it, but just a reminder, especially when we return to Councilman Miller's feedback on the proposal for year 5's plan. Since then, since our committee meeting, the Economic Development Commission met, and we received this feedback. Now, we're going to revisit the details of the year 5 plan and the action steps that we proposed. But recall from the first presentation that action item 1 was to refocus the Economic Development Commission and re-engage them. Not just because it's a requirement of the charter, but because we want what the plan espouses and what we want, what I want, is that the Economic Development Commission started with some momentum and some purpose, especially during county transition. Recall that the commission is comprised of a member of council, the county executive, and then many of the stakeholders in economic development, including the chamber, labor, nonprofit, business community, the Port Authority, and others. But the roles of the commission cannot usurp the role of the Economic Development Committee and council. And if I were to hypothesize, my view is that the authors of the charter probably thought that there'd be a more active role in helping, in that commission, probably determining which loans would get approved or how incentives would be done. But as we evolved at the county council, rightly, it is the appropriating body that makes sure that that exists and that accountable oversight from council is the lead on that sort of thing when we propose things. So an important change that we proposed to the commission was to be very specific about the Economic Development Commission doing the work for the county and not directing the county's work. So instead of the commission weighing in on what should be done by the county for economic development, this Economic Development Commission body instead would start to focus what we all can do, we being that commission and all of their networks, on behalf of the county and how to strengthen what the county's strategy is that is approved by county council. And that's important because a lot of the feedback that I get from this committee and individually and collectively is that we're not doing enough out. We have to engage outside more, and they're going to be helpful to us. So here's some of the feedback that we got from the commission. After proposing the plan to them, They had a couple of questions and a couple of statements about what should be the next steps and direction of the commission. The first was they asked, can the commission be expanded? There was a question about whether or not there should be the 9 members that are presented by the charter, and if that is a 9 and no more, or if it's 9 potentially more, or if there could be an informal expansion. The thought being, is there an opportunity, yet to be defined, where we can expand the commission to expand its reach? So that was one of the questions that was raised. Another is, how can the economic development ecosystem work with the commission? There's a typo in there, that's my fault. To help answer the question, what can we do to close the gap? The genesis of the gap was something I'll revisit when we talk about year 5 of the plan, is we had pretty impressive outputs around job creation, but the outcomes underwhelmed. We were generating a number of jobs that were created, but not necessarily moving the needle to keep up with the region and the state around job creation in Cuyahoga County for Cuyahoga County residents. So the commission wanted to see who else can we talk to about closing that gap. And this is some of the ecosystem partners. This is let me translate it a little bit using more direct language. How can we, the commission, use our positions and influence to help get other organizations in line with what the county wants to achieve in terms of economic development? So that would include the Workforce Investment Board, or reentry activities, or Team NEO, or the chambers, or businesses and CEOs, academies, NOACA, and transportation, those sorts of entities that are not under the auspices of county government, but their work is in many respects for the county. So how can that group help influence the activities of other economic development partners? And how can, also to create a forum for those to give input to the commission about what the county can do to be a better partner too. Similarly is our engagement with mayors, managers, and those cities, period. Better outreach directly to the cities. Another consideration was recommendations to specify specific industry clusters that we're interested in pursuing. And a side note was to engage some of the academies and others on research that could tell us where the best and most fruitful targets would be. Next is formalizing and being able to communicate on behalf of the commission their opinion on what other partners' activities might be. So if Jobs Ohio has a strategy that they may make public, it might make sense for the commission to give an opinion. Same thing with the WIB or others, some of those other partners. I think more important to, and more specific to this committee, is recommendations on setting goals, to make a statement about what jobs are we creating, not just how many jobs are we creating. And we, in this case, is the imperial we to include the county, not just the Department of Development, but clearly we would be well served to marry up our metrics with theirs. And I think one of the feedback items that we'll talk to is that the department be specific about its goals and its plan. Of course, more fundamental is to fill the vacancy that's on the commission, and one last minute item was to conduct and present an asset inventory. So that was their feedback. When replaying that to them, their next meeting is in a month. The agenda is to fill the vacancy, to review the lists of who they want to engage in a public forum and prioritize those, determine how and if the commission should be expanded, and then proposing what to measure and setting goals. And we'll make sure that there's an asset inventory for them beforehand, because I think we can whip that up with a partner pretty quickly. And also helping the agenda for the commission to determine what strategies it wants to prioritize on.
Do we have any answers to that previous slide, as far as like expansion or any of those things? It's been a few weeks, and I didn't know if we've got a reading on that.
Mr. Chair, my plan of action is to collect feedback from this committee and review with my colleagues both the feedback of the commission and the committee in case there's revisions that need to happen for the economic development plan before it's passed by the end of August. That's a longer way of saying we haven't made any headway on these items, but we will before the next committee meeting, next commission meeting. I think specifically referring to the vacancy and whether or not we can expand.
Yeah, because the one will kick out even a higher demand for vacancies than if you can open up three or four positions, then your list of names of people and candidates and becomes a lot broader.
No, we're going to make Councilman Conwell's committee very busy.
So
Sure.
with regard to the expansion itself, I'm not sure that I have enough information to say whether an expansion is going to accomplish the goal rather than having the current members or the composition of the board work in a different way or more efficiently or effectively. Is it the sheer number, or is it how much they're doing and engaged to begin with?
Well, at least having sat at the commission at the last meeting, I think it's not sheer number. It is, and it's not volume. It's to bring in different voices that we don't have currently right now. For example, we don't have employment coming in from the arts community sitting there as far as being a job creator. It doesn't sit actively on there. And one could argue that labor, because there are a lot of labor that works in the theater, you might get the voice there, but Harriet did not feel as though that was going to come in that way. You might feel as though you're going to get that from GCP, but again, Joe Roman didn't feel as though it'd be better to have the voice of some of these actual people that are job creators in the arts community, within the medical community, actually sitting on this. Because right now, if you look at it, it looks like when they created the charter, it was pick one from every one of these. It looked like a Chinese menu, and they had to pick one from every one of the areas, as opposed to real in-depth analysis. So that's all we're looking at, is to see whether or not you could expand it, and then you actually do hopefully have expectation of higher work, because each one of these people are coming in, whether it's the chairman of the Port Authority. Well, he's trying to run the port. The chairman of the head of the AFL-CIO, she's trying to run her union, and so everybody's got already a full-time job in addition to this.
Yeah, I just don't want to recreate the wheel. It seems like the players are there. It's just getting them together in a room to brainstorm. It's not, we're trying to expand the, I guess, participation in a deeper level from these partners.
No, actually trying to look and see whether or not you could have actually the job creators at the table is what the expectation is, as opposed to somebody speaking on behalf of them. For example, could you get I'll just throw it in, Sandy Cutler, who was retiring from Eaton Corporation, and would he have the ability to have influence jobs here in town if he would actually take an active role in something of this nature? At least that was the basis for the conversation.
Yeah, I don't care. I think you said it, though. These people have full-time jobs, and add more. I'm just wondering, it doesn't matter to me if it's job creators, whatever that means. I think all these partners are job creators in a different way. I don't know how you define a job creator. Somebody from the arts community, it's not necessarily a job. It's a spin-off benefit from the arts, but I'm not sure these are all job creators. I don't know how we're defining that, or what they're going to be able to do to sit here versus effectively doing what they're doing. Is this an outreach effort by these job creators to bring jobs, or like an economic development director presumably is doing, or is this getting people in a room to think tank and come up with strategies on how to increase the bottom line?
Thanks. I think it's early at this point in time to come up with a conclusion. I think we're still in the research phase. It sounds like, even as to whether it's even a viable alternative first.
Just raising questions.
Yeah,
And I'm
which is
collecting
all
your
good
feedback.
stuff.
So I'm going to transition into this year's 5-year plan. And one thing that we need to recall is a given, is that years 1 through 4 haven't stopped. That work continues, particularly with the accomplishments around having the resources and tools that do need refinement, but the notion of economic development continuing to be a fundamental purpose for for county government continues, required by the charter, but also still significant. The distinction is to tailor our programs so that we're not going for pure gross numbers, but instead, over time, and this is going to take significant research, effort, trial and error, that we are tailoring our programs to not just create raw numbers of jobs, though we want those gross numbers, but also that where possible, we're tailoring the programs so that the kinds of jobs that we are recruiting and incentivizing are those where the job demand is a better connection for the available labor supply. And we're going to walk through some of those things, but we don't have all the answers on this yet because it's going to take time. We have to have better information about, what are those disconnects on labor demand and supply and how to approach them. The priorities around economic development are here, and they are in line with the priorities of this administration. You'll see when we go on to the next slide of how we do our programs that they're, as best we can, aligned with the priorities of government. Now, part of this is because there needs to be better connectivity between the work of the Department of Economic Development, the Department of Development, along with our colleagues in HHS and our colleagues in sustainability and our colleagues in public works, our colleagues in planning. So while these are the activities of the department, they are not without connectivity to our colleagues in other departments. So having these priorities continue as a theme, which are priorities that are shared by my colleagues in other departments, are important.
Can you go back to that slide and just
Yes, sir.
better explain to me so I can understand how the connectivity is that you're expounding between these different departments and how that generates, because each one of those are being measured based on what they're doing within their department. How does that connection between, HHS and economic development show me a path that actually is something that measures your success?
Sure. Building those linear paths is going to be a challenge and is part of the challenge that has been given to us by the county executive around creating the linear paths. One example that is probably the most difficult is one that we're working on where we have a significant population that receives services of many kinds in our HHS realm. Many of them are tasked with, many of those clients have to go through workforce development training programs and other placement programs, but there isn't connectivity between the kinds of jobs that the county is paying for training and the kinds of jobs that we're recruiting and incentivizing. So building that bridge without creating a burden on the employer and without creating inefficiency on providing those services is something that we aspire to do. It's going to take a long time, but an example to make it tangible would be if we are recruiting a number of bakeries.
And we're what? I'm sorry.
Number of bakeries,
Okay.
just to talk about widgets. And we have job training available for bakers, but we're not steering clients into training to become a baker. Then we've recruited businesses to grow, presumably, and build their bakeries, yet we have a deficiency around available bakers. we would like to bridge that divide, where if there is an established demand for bakers, then we're encouraging clients to go towards learning how to bake.
I missed the connect, I didn't hear the Health and Human Service connection, unless I missed it.
Well, because many of those folks that are clients in HHS have to go through job placement programs, job training programs, and if we're steering them to become trained in positions that don't exist, then we're creating an inefficiency where those folks are well-skilled but still unemployed people.
But that's the same no matter what profession or no matter what the gap is. I guess having a hard time understand, or at least I'm trying to understand where's the connection between this bullet and what, my opinion of at least the economic development would be ultimately you come out with this banner that shows how many jobs were created and impactful as a result of your activity. The different departments will be coming out with their banner showing how impactful they were in servicing the health and human service needs. Show me how those connect. I didn't hear it. Maybe anybody else?
To perpetuate a bad analogy, it is for me to ask David Merriman to make sure that as he's working with the Workforce and Investment Board, that the kinds of programs that the WIB is developing and that we're funding are generating the kinds of employees that are going to be hired by the very same businesses that we're trying to incentivize to grow. There is, every business that I have met with since the beginning of this year has said workforce is an impediment, or the lack of availability of workforce is an impediment to their growth. And meanwhile, we have a supply of folks that are unemployed. So the challenge is, how do we bridge that gap? You're right when you say, I don't see the connection, because it isn't there yet. And that's one of the things that we need to work on when I say that we're agnostic around which department is leading these different things, but to make sure that we are going in that direction is fundamental to this plan.
Well, then it just, I like measurements and goals and objectives that you can target. So perhaps you can bring some clarity to me as far as what your goal is and what their goal is in what we just went through this conversation. Ms. Simon, maybe?
I'm actually confused by the redundancy that I see in terms of the language we're speaking. This WIG board's already in place to service the needs of people coming off of our TANF programs or coming whatever aspect of our county or society that needs to get a job or training. That board, I thought, is in place to accomplish that. And when the board comes into the committee on which Chairman Tron sits with me, Education and Environment, we hear all the time how they're trying to bridge that gap. And it's the same clients that they would be serving wherever they come from, whether it's coming off of HHS or not. So I'm not sure what's so special about this particular grouping that we're talking about, which should be serviced the same way anyway. So isn't really the goal then to harness in this, find out what this board's doing to make sure that they're impactful, which they say they are working on and are. So it just doesn't seem like we're connecting these dots and we're speaking different language.
Sure. Well, the example I gave also brings in a third agency that it will be coming, but is not a department. So perhaps a different approach would be, it's my understanding that a number of folks that go through training at the WIB board populate a website with their resumes and skills, and yet we don't require employers that receive benefits to have a look at that job board to see if that they, as a first look for recruiting potential employees. It's those sorts of disconnects that are functional. As far as measuring, one of the things that we talk about, Councilman, is what is it that we need to measure and what are those universal measurements where different departments can start to measure the same things so that we can declare success, not just in HHS, but in economic development.
Okay, well, I'll let you continue because I'm still struggling to find that you would set this target, there's the goal, and then when you achieve it, then everybody can say, yeah, that was a good activity, and how it relates. You went and said how Edie is going to be relating to all 5 of these bullets. So I was just trying to figure out what would be the determination in fairness and equity as far as a success. What would be, I know job growth and opportunity, I can see that one. And government gets results. I'm looking for that as opposed to just the administrative conversation as opposed to the actual down in the streets.
Well, perhaps we can talk about some of the programs and some new and somehow let me talk about some of the new programs. Those are in the darker blue or darker purple. And hopefully that will illuminate a little bit better than my unsuccessful attempt. Let's start with first.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, do you mean purple or blue? I have 2 colors here.
I'm colorblind.
Purple.
And so I'm going to go with the darker color that is on top where it says innovation centers. Those, what color is that? More purple. All right, so more purple.
See,
It's a plum color.
guys are we're all colorblind. So the ladies never are colorblind on the Army check tests. We always found was the guys that, and purple was actually one of the colors we lost.
Within innovation, entrepreneurs, startups, early stage, there are benefits here in many sectors. Innovation centers is one that the county executive mentioned about partnering with the libraries, but there are other sources of innovation that we can help to foster. One that is specific is trying to help our libraries with providing resources for accessible business development, technical assistance for folks that want to go through programs that are in their neighborhoods without having to go to a specific nonprofit that might be a little bit more intimidating. The partners in that wouldn't be just the county, of course. It'd be some of the other nonprofits that you guys are familiar with, either because we fund them, been a partner with them, like ECDI or Magnet or their PRISM program and others that are helping with business development or business planning tools, helping with ideation, helping them get to some of the more formalized business training programs, oftentimes for folks that don't have formal business training.
That's a perfect example. Okay, with getting granular at this point in time, what is going to be defined as if you look back a year or 2 years from now and say, wow, that innovation center concept was a success because we did and it achieved. What is the list of things that you're anticipating and then the hope for achievement? I mean, obviously your actions and then the achievement are always going to line up as you plan on the drawing board. But what are the steps that are going to be taken, and then what are the goals that we think are going to be achieved as a result of that?
We haven't created specific goals on this program, but some of the others we have.
How about action steps? What are the action steps without necessarily saying what the goals will be?
Our action steps right now are building a curriculum, getting partners to be able to have these innovation centers at the libraries, and then we would have launch. What we haven't set up is, or established what the goal in terms of engagements is and outputs, because we're going to need some of our partners' input on that.
Ms. Simon?
So I don't even understand this library thing. So the intention is to provide launch house equivalent inside public libraries and have workshops there on occasion, or a standing launch house at particular libraries? What's the vision for this?
Broader than launch house, but launch house is a good visualization for the purpose of this conversation. It is not, the intent is not the county to invest or duplicate, but instead to encourage folks like the launch house to participate with the libraries and have the county help with getting the message out about this opportunity that exists and all of these partners that are working together. The difference between Launch House on its own is that it is present in neighborhoods that are throughout the county.
And this is a volunteer or a funded activity?
There is not a budget item present for the county's participation. It's more of a encouragement and inducement effort.
No, I thought I heard there was going to be equipment installed from the county, and so that there ought to be a budget item that says we're going to install equipment. If we're going to install 3D printers or whatever I've heard, on just this topic?
I have no current asks for equipment paid for by the county to be installed at the library.
Okay.
Do
Well,
you know, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think,
Budget is not established, but the vision is not to have a county expense on this. There'll be time, but not fresh expenses.
okay, well, time usually means a budget at some point along the way, but it was, I think you're gonna find out this committee is gonna be asking, okay, if you're gonna do these activities, what are the achievements that we're gonna define success based on? And I'm just gonna pick on that one because it was the first one that came up. So, you said you're not prepared to discuss that, but I think it's very important for this committee to know if this is gonna be another featured item out there, what is it? What is the definition of success?
Got it.
Yeah, Ms. Simon, you? Yep. Yep, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to only be looking this direction. It's unusual for me to look left, right? I'll look. Yes,
Mr.
Mr.
Chair,
Mann?
I'm just wondering, this innovation centers, is this something that the library board itself has accepted the challenge coming up with this?
It's my understanding the library is committed to this 100%.
Was it initiated by us or by the libraries
I
that they
don't know
come?
the genesis of it.
Okay. Okay. Well, the only reason I say that is if it started at the libraries, I think some of the specifics as to budget probably would be their responsibility. If they haven't asked yet, it seems like it's a program that they're initiating that fits into the greater good plan.
Mr. Greenspan?
Yeah, thank you. So, couple things. We're talking about the connectivity of those businesses seeking employees and those employees seeking jobs and trying to build the connectivity between the two. What's the relationship with Ohio Means Jobs and the county? Because I believe.
How can I answer that question in a productive way?
Well,
What do you mean?
well, from what there are 60,000 jobs within 35 miles of this building on Ohio Means Jobs, where their employers are looking for qualified employees. Their headquarters is a block of what's on the other side of our parking garage. What type of relationship do we have with them? It seems to me that would be a logical jumping off point, since we've got employers known seeking employees, and it's supposed to serve kind of as a job board to help employees be, job seekers to find qualified jobs. But if the intent is to fill that skills gap, we know where the skills gap is. We know where the we know where the jobs are. What are we doing to help plug in, residents of the county seeking employment with these companies desiring to hire people?
Well, I think that your comment underscores some of the detailed work that we can do when we're recruiting businesses or helping them grow, which is to participate in those networks that we already have, like having them participate in Ohio Means Jobs. Not every employer does that. Not every employer knows about Ohio Means Jobs, and some employers have had experiences that have made them not eager to participate with Ohio Means Jobs again. The other thing is that a significant number we invest in programs that are administered by Ohio Means Jobs. So we want to make sure that those things are connected. What is our relationship? I don't know how to characterize it, but it could be improved, especially on the employer placing those people into those 60,000 positions that you referenced. It needn't be only from Ohio Means Jobs, but I think that there's a lengthy discussion to be had about how we can better partner with them. And that's more on the supplying qualified workers and labor for our employers here. There's probably a conversation to be had too about, on the HHS side, the folks that need training, are they getting the right training? And those are the sorts of things that we need to make better connections with.
Right, and that's my point. And we know, people go to school to earn a certain skill, trade, get an educational background with the expectation of getting a job. Right, my daughter graduates from college next year. I'm really hopeful that the skills she's been training towards translate into a job. On the flip side, we've got companies that are saying, hey, I need CNC operators. I need these things, not to quote from manufacturing, but we need these certain skills. Why are we not being, you're right, coordinating with our workforce development partners and with HHS and offering in a more proactive manner the fact that if you're looking for a job and you have an interest in one of these X number of thousands of open jobs, help match them up. Because if my number, I think it's 60,000. If it's 60,000 open jobs in Cuyahoga County, let's just use that number. I don't know what's the total number of unemployed actually seeking employment is in the county. It's got to be great, it's got to be obviously more than 60,000, but that's got to be at least half the people looking for work in the county that we can match them up.
I might need to take a shot before I say this. I agree with you. One of the challenges is that there's a disconnect between the kinds of businesses that we are incentivizing their growth and the ones that, and the available labor pool that is seeking employment. And so if we can better target our outreach to those businesses that want to grow and want to grow that will benefit from the available labor supply, oversupply, then we're fixing an inefficiency there. And that's something that right now our programs are focused on getting the numbers and having some wins, which we're proud of, but we can better hone them so that we're better connecting with labor supply, so that those 60,000 folks, we're recruiting businesses to employ those 60,000. Now, you could make the case, hey, we don't really need to do that because if we're growing jobs, presumably we'll be drawing from that pool. That may be the case, but I'd like to be able to be back here in a year and tell you, well, we made it down that 60K number. We did it with partnerships, but we also did it by tailoring our programs. That work is detailed. It's going to be a lot of work. It's going to make Michael May very busy, but it's going to take some science too. And so that's why this year is a very planful year about how we're tailoring these programs to meet that need.
I'm not saying that $1 million to help a business create 30 jobs isn't important or whatever some of those metrics are. But if we were to take $1 million and invest it in workforce development, even just employment connectivity activities, and we're able to place 1,000 jobs, 1,000 people, 2,000. I mean, it seems to me like there are already activities in place, there are already processes in place that with effort on our part, we can solve a lot of these, we can make a dent in the vacant job market in the county. Because, a lot of communities throughout this state don't have job demand. That's part of their problem. They're trying to bring in, our focus has been bringing companies in. Well, we've got a base of employers here that are looking for people. And we've got people who need training. And I don't know why we've not placed a greater effort on, a job's a job. I mean, I'm not saying, a job at $8 an hour is different than a job at $20 an hour. Obviously, we know it is. I don't mean to minimize that aspect of it. But if somebody's looking for a job, and we've got whatever the number is, tens of thousands of jobs available, the ROI on us spending our resources to help match those folks up, to me, would be much greater than trying to vet out and weed out $1 million for one company for 30 jobs.
I agree with you.
So, but where is that in these, whether it's the blue or purple or whatever the colors we can't see here are, where are we focused on that activity?
Generically speaking, when we say we're aligning our investment approach with county priorities, it is that which you've captured in one sentence. We need to better align our programs that exist And then some of the new ones with that very condition that you described.
Okay.
And it is not a simple task. And the reason why we have some ambiguity here is because we're building that right now. We're building those relationships, that understanding that was not a priority while we were building the capacity and the programs on a broader scale until this point. Now we have the opportunity to pivot. And our pivot is to start to sharpen those things. You've summed up a good chunk of what our work will be over the next year, how we're connecting those gaps.
As we indicated in the, at the commission, that the original 5-year plan said that we were going to try to be the facilitator to try to bring those groups together. And to my understanding, that I know it's a tough task and it's like herding cats, but we didn't do that. And that was one of our measurable goals, was to try to bring part of those 600 together to help address this issue. Somebody's going to have to be the one who's going to have to play the bully pulpit to try and bring that together. And as I think the people were looking for the county to be that resource out there. And I would highly, and I notice that it has drifted away from in the current 5-year plan. I brought it up at the commission meeting, and I think it really needs to be examined, because we still have all these rogue organizations, not rogue, we have all these multiple organizations that are going in multiple different directions, but nobody is just throwing this big tent and saying, let us be the big tent and bring them together. So I would highly encourage that. Ms. Simon?
It just seems to me what is being described from this committee is really the role supposedly of the WIP board that has been trying to close that gap of a demand from corporate employers or employers that need a labor workforce, and it's hanging out there. Why first of all, are we coordinating with this board and trying to work with them, or are we gonna, first of all, that's the question. How involved is your department with this board that's doing or supposed to be doing what we're talking about needs to be done?
Getting more engaged with WIB and getting a better understanding of what those opportunities are.
What would this help from this committee or from us as council people to really force, more aggressively get this dynamic going?
Well, I think that dynamic is underway in so far as when we're trying to align our programs, it's so that we're plugging into that very activity. And that's why it's going to take some time. Either the WIB in its present and future is also its own organization that has its own programs, and we need to get them to align with ours as well. This is a priority of the county executives, and so we are working on those things, but I can't be prescriptive yet because there's other moving parts, many of which are on our from the HHS side, but also coming from the state. You know, the state has is looking for change in our workforce development system too. So we need, alignment can oftentimes be a deliberately ambiguous word, but it is an appropriate term in this case because we are not aligned now and we're in motion, and we want to make sure that we're connecting with them. Previously, we were not connecting with them.
Perhaps another approach would have been, instead of more blocks, would have been less. I just throw that out there, only to allow you to get up to speed, because at least it appears to me as though your head count is actually lower today in total economic development support than it was 3 and 4 years ago. I don't know if that's a guess or whether that's a correct, is that a correct analysis?
That's correct.
Yeah, and so that creates its own set of challenges. And I really thought that these 3D printers and stuff was part of the administration's desire to do that with the libraries. I thought I heard that from the state of the county speech.
Whether we're paying for them, to be precise, whether we're paying for them has not been determined. But making sure that the library is successful is a priority for the county executive. So,
But the concept is what of these innovation centers, where the dollars came from for some of the subcomponents. But I assume everything up here has a dollar associated with it in some way, shape, or form, because it's a dollar of energy that takes away from Mr. Mays or yourself or whatever it happens to be when you start taking this and spreading it across multiple different platforms.
Mr. Chair, if I could add to the dollar component of it, and I'll throw in a plug as we get ready to start our budget review in October, whether we're paying for laptops or not, if there's a county resource, i.e. a person who's going to be working on this project, whose time is going to be associated with whether it's the library project or anything else, that program will need to be justified, meaning we're going to need to know the mission, the objective, measurables, talent, budget line items, capital items. So even though the concept may be not on our dime for the 3D printers or for the computers or the real estate to host these events in libraries, if 10% of your time is associated with that project, that's an individual project that's going to need to be budgeted and justified, just as if it was the creation of a new department, agency, or board within the county. So as these items are presented here, keep in mind when the budget review process takes place, if it's insufficiently prepared and provided to council, I could be, might not make it through the budget process.
Understood.
Now that we thoroughly screwed up your flow, would you like to continue?
Well, I would love to continue, and I would like to highlight that when we see these programs that are the not plum colored, the connectivity continues, sharpening that to the activities of other agencies and other departments is part of our work over the next year. And when we spoke of the future of the Economic Development Commission, the gist there is to help them add to the bully pulpit, to help make sure that we're speaking of one voice. The county is the only party that is responsible and has to honor the county charter and the economic development plan. So the hope is that we have a commission that is helping us more externally give more weight, more gravitas to what the council and the county executive are doing on economic development. It's our desire that the commission is doing the work for the county and that this activity is the work by the county. Some of that work by the county. Next is this microenterprise development activity. And one of the things that we spoke about is measurable and empirical performance. Microenterprise development, council committed to about $500,000 in 2013 to help us partner with ECDI. The focus is micro loans for growing businesses or to help with entrepreneurs. The two things that are most important among these loans that are less than $25,000, they're usually sole proprietors or have a partner, is technical assistance. And so we worked with ECDI to add a little bit of financial capacity. We worked with the Cleveland Foundation, the City of Cleveland, and Huntington Bank to help fund their work. In the past 2 years, using county funds, they assisted in the creation of 121 businesses. More than half of them were minority-owned businesses. More than 60% were female-owned enterprises. And that activity is growth and opportunity. It's creating opportunity and helping entrepreneurs build their own business. It's also fairness and equity and government that gets results. Our expectation is that we'll be able to bring to you an expansion of that effort to continue it. All of the $500,000 has been expended. I think effectively, I'll make that case in a different committee meeting. But we'd like to be able to add volume and capacity to that sort of activity. Because if we can continue that work, we'll continue to have significant impact. The next area are 3 programs for which we'll be coming back to council. We've issued 3 RFPs to help find partners on providing the appropriate kind of capital to companies that have the highest promise of growth. Now, just because we've issued the RFPs doesn't require us to go to contract, but the principles here are very similar to what I described with micro enterprise development, but with a little bit higher potential for growth. We know that venture capital is very concentrated on the coasts, and the more experience we can provide, which is proven by Third Frontier, Ohio Capital Fund, and others, where there's investments from outside the county in businesses that are located in the county, that not only do they help businesses that are here grow and grow more quickly, but that having capital here physically, or spent here, and having people here that are making those investments that are not from here, increases the likelihood that we're able to get other businesses the kinds of capital that they need. So these 3 programs for which we've done RFPs, the RFPs are due at the end of this month. The first is the early stage fund that it would propose a program that will help close the venture capital gap and investing in greater Cleveland businesses. We would have a partner where the county is not necessarily making the investment decisions. We would be helping to fund an administrator. In order for administrator to propose to us, they'd have to be able to demonstrate a couple of important things. One is that they're able to build a fund of $10 million, that they'll be able to secure any loan that comes from us to the administrator. They'd be able to pay us back with principal and interest. We proposed a 2% interest rate. And that approach would be duplicated in 2 others. So that would be targeting companies that have high potential for growth. The next is the Accelerated Growth Fund, a little bit more traditional.
Are we planning on opening up these funds to go into like an early stage investor? Is that what you, are we the early stage investor, or are we putting this money in like Jumpstart was given capital from the state of Ohio, and then they assigned it to various early stage investing firms?
It's that model based on the success of the Third Frontier model, but located only in Cuyahoga County.
Okay. And so how much money are you proposing that we're going to be putting into this?
Up to $2 million over 3 years. I would like to reiterate, we do an RFP. If we have a proposal that is worthy of presenting and funding, we'd bring it to council and go into the details of any particular contract before any of those funds would be awarded. They would be drawn down on demand. They wouldn't just get $2 million. They'd have to draw down over 3 years.
So that's going into one account, one funder?
In this case, we're proposing one funder,
Okay.
and we'll see what we get. The deadline is at the end of the month.
And they have to raise the balance of the $10 million through investors coming into their pool?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, just a question on any of the county resources going in, what buckets or bucket is that coming from?
Our expectation is that we would propose, when the time is right, that would be using funds from our economic development funds that have been budgeted for the department.
Okay,
2015.
thank you.
Furthermore, it would be spread over a handful of years. The Accelerated Growth Fund is to target businesses that are a little bit more traditional. Same concept, except a little bit more, they would be the businesses that would be in the stage following that ECDI model, where the loans are a little bit larger and they're not necessarily in target clusters around tech, but are nonetheless growing quickly. In this case, what we're proposing in the RFP is similar amount, principal and interest, guaranteed repayment, and that there's a minimum requirement of 50% to MBEs or FBEs, or in a eligible area. The last
Is that also a $2 million that we're prepared to put in?
up to 2 million over 3 years to one administrator if qualified and awarded.
And then they have to raise the balance of a $10 million fund in this one also?
In this case, they would have to raise the balance of at least 10 million. I forget what we committed to. I think it was no less than 9 million on this one, a little bit more traditional. Lastly is the innovation match for pre-seed. Our target here is not going to be limited to just one potential administrator, but a little bit more broad, a little bit more open. And the idea is to try to marry the terms of the Ohio Third Frontier pre-seed capital funds so that we're helping any potential partner draw down a Third Frontier funds to Cuyahoga County. In this case, any administrator, again, would have to guarantee a repayment, interest rate, principal and interest, and it would be over 3 years. The amount here that we've put out for RFP is 3.5 million. And again, in this case, it would be multiple potential awards, but we'll have to see when we have our proposals in. If there are unsuitable proposals, then we'll probably revisit the terms and the approach and try again. But we're not going to bring something that we don't think is going to be successful for your review and award.
Traditionally, when these kind of things are done, you gain a seat at the table. Is it the expectation that the county would be sitting at either one of these early stage loan fund or the accelerated growth loan fund if we're sitting with $20 million worth of resource capital out there?
In all three instances, this issue was heavily weighed among my colleagues about strategy. We wanted to be able to have a member of the county present for how they do due diligence and how they make their awards for educational purposes and to help us learn this. So we get, in addition to the opportunity cost of having those funds out on loan, that we'd be able to learn how they're doing those things. However, we also thought that we would be better served and find more competitive proposals if the county didn't have a vote, but instead the parties had to make regular reports. They're pretty detailed about to whom they're lending. They have to be prescriptive about their prospectus, not just to begin, they would have, and this is in the RFP, they will have to detail their prospectus, how they intend to make their investments, what their target investments would be. And then after an investment is made, what are the dynamics of that? What are the results? And then, of course, at the end of the loan term, we're still supposed to be repaid. In fact, one of the conditions that we presented in our RFP was that the county is repaid the initial loan amount, and if the portfolio that the administrator builds grows at more than 2%, more than 2x the portfolio, then the county would get a portion of that growth as well. So the idea is that we're a partner in the high side potential, but we are also being very prudent with the loan amounts by still requiring repayment. So if the loan to an administrator yielded no repayments or no growth from their investments, the administrator is still responsible for repaying the county. On the other hand, if the county's portfolio that's induced by the administrator is particularly successful, then we would be a beneficiary of that success.
This is a fairly technical area of investing and going forward. What expertise do we actually have if we're going to be the monitoring body, as opposed to this is a place where now you bump that 9-person and you bring in somebody at the next higher level, because this is the objective of this is to get somebody to start, grow, and then ultimately go into a truly VC need. This would be a great place to get somebody from like a Riverside or from an early stage partners or one of those folks who's the next round up above this to sit on that 9-member because they then holds, they bring in expertise that I asked the question rhetorically, I just don't know, so I'll let you answer. I apologize for moving into an answer, because it's a tough area to wrestle with, especially in Northeastern Ohio, because we don't have as much expertise they do on the West Coast or East Coast on this.
Well, I think it's a fair perspective that we need to be prepared to answer when we bring any potential award to committee, to council. But I would also say that's why we take this approach. Instead of us saying, hey, we want to invest in startup companies that are growing, we know that we don't have the expertise to evaluate the likelihood of their success. And that's why we're trying to help identify an administrator and add to that administrator's capacity rather than doing it ourselves. But your feedback that we also need to be able to evaluate with credibility the kinds of reports that we're getting from those administrators is heard well.
Thanks. I think that's an area where you could be bumping our number from 9 to 10 or 11 to 12 if we could bring in somebody with that expertise onto the commission, because once a quarter would be more than enough time to get that kind of update and with people with expertise in that area. And I'm envisioning that a lot of this work would be done outside of that 9-member commission. It would be done in committee type things.
Mr. Chair, can I ask?
Yes, Mr. Greenspan.
So I couple, these 3 RFPs, they've been outstanding since March. We're in July. What's been the status as to why, or what's the reasoning behind why it's been?
The proposal, the RFPs went out in March with the expectation that Ohio Third Frontier, as it had in years past, would be releasing their own RFPs in the end of first quarter, early second quarter. Ohio Third Frontier did not release their RFPs until the beginning of June or mid-June. And so because we wanted to have a program that was attracting other capital, including Third Frontier, we wanted to make sure that the window was open until the Ohio Third Frontier RFPs had been released, so that potential bidders would be able to have clarity about what Third Frontier would be doing.
Okay.
That was the cause for the delay.
Okay.
I can't help that we're more effective and move more quickly than the state.
No comment there. I mean,
Do you have any proposals?
that's one of the reasons why, when we went to a 2-year biennial budget, we staggered ours to be in response to the state budget. I'll look at the chairman because he sponsored that, so we can be proactive to and respond to changes from the state. A different question, different direction. So the chart you have up, I don't know if you can blow it out. This just may be a slide of the various programs that are listed here, whether they're blue or purple. And my mindset is right now focusing on outcome-based performance. Are any of these performing better than others? And are there some we're ready to disband and focus our energies on those that are more successful?
It's a great question, and it's something that I've challenged my team to present to us. What are the programs that we're doing that we don't need to do anymore because they don't work? We want to be able to get through the planning process to be able to build these programs, because some of them will have overlap. For example, the Next Stage Loan Fund has some overlap potentially with proposals that might come from the RFPs. That may not be the case, so we're going to want to evaluate that. When some of our most effective programs are in an area where the county definitely understands property, and so revitalization and expansion is something that we're particularly good at. Those are the ones that have hard collateral, that are easier to articulate, and there's good, I mentioned collateral where it's something that we're comfortable presenting to council.
I mean, I would say place, between storefront, muni grant, demolition, those on that side, sustainability is obviously new, but, those, obviously, we've seen success in our communities. Some of these others, maybe not as much, and that's why I'm just asking, are we going to see recommendations for expansion in some and reductions or elimination in others?
We can deliver to you, and I think we have a report of all of the activity that we've had by program. We do not budget specific to program because, so we wouldn't be discouraging participation in one particular program and encouraging in another. I don't think we're there yet. But if there is a program that is taking up time and effort that is not effective, then we'd like to sunset it. We're not proposing ending anything at this point, but my expectation is for year 6, we'd be able to.
Okay.
One thing, transitioning from the accelerated growth area, in revitalization, I highlighted that those are programs we want to continue. Again, where we can make better connections to opportunity for those that are currently unemployed or seeking employment or better jobs than they have now, then that's how these programs can be sharpened. Same around competitiveness and attraction. There's one here that's new. It's plum colored, is the business ombudsman. One of the things that the county executive heard loud and clear through meeting with 100 businesses in the first quarter, more than that, is a number of businesses will call the county through many different doors because they have a challenge, and how can we help them address that? So we're going to have a person, part of his or her role will be to help identify those problems and help them get addressed. Many of them are playing operator. I've got a problem with my zoning permit, and the county doesn't do that. So we need to be able to help that business connect to, let's say, the Brooklyn Building Commissioner to make sure that that problem's getting solved and that we're following up there. Or I've got a problem accessing Jobs Ohio programs or et cetera. And we need to be able to have a presence there to be able to help businesses do that. Now, part of that role is one that will also be shared with the rest of my team on the economic development side. Part of this plan is better engagement out in the public. And Mike and I agree that a lot of our time is spent working on programs, deals, going through the kinds of activities inside the business. And we're doing a lot of cleaning, but we're not doing enough hunting. And so what we endeavor to do is to take this ethos of a business ombudsman position, but have it be shared among many folks inside the department, so that a portion of the economic development team's responsibilities, 15 or 20%, will be meeting with chambers proactively, meeting with Rotary clubs and others to help tell the story about what activities, what are the tools that the county has, and then also to help them with what the state is doing or what other cities are doing. Because too often we hear from businesses those questions. Where do I start? How do I access it? Or the county doesn't even do anything in economic development. And so we want to reverse that. That is going to be part of our outbound messaging, which will help businesses that are considering growing and aren't thinking about engaging the county, and so maybe they give up, or even worse, grow someplace else. We want to be able to let folks know that we can help them grow in place. And that's going to be a significant part of a shift.
So, Mr. Chair.
And, pardon me, I also hope that it's responsive to some criticism from this group that is, Nate, what are you doing on outbound marketing?
This ombudsman, I'm making notes here, this ombudsman position is more of a facilitator than anything else, correct? That's what it's here to do.
Well, more than facilitator,
Okay.
problem solver, making sure that businesses, when they want to apply for something, get some special customer service,
Okay.
but is also, if they need direction navigating within the county or other cities or the state, that there's somebody that we can rely on to help drive some of those solutions.
I'm going to jar your memory. This goes back to before this government was in place, when you and I had a different relationship. When I crafted somewhat of an economic development department structure, we're setting up economic development zones. I don't know if I get, we talked about this from probably a year before this government took, back in early 2010, where basically an economic development zone was not defined by council district, but of communities of like economic development interest. I think we came up, or I came up with 7, ran it by you, we talked about it a number of times. And each zone had an economic development specialist who did just that. Their job was to work with the businesses, to work with the chambers of commerce, to work with anybody in that zone that had any interest in economic development activities. This person's intent was to go to every chamber meeting, show up at businesses and find out what they wanted, but also to serve as that liaison between the county and the businesses and the county, and also to work with the economic development directors, however they're defined within each community, to serve as an extension of those that don't have economic development directors or need assistance in their departments when it comes to identifying land assets that need development. To understand that in a community they may not have an interest in industrial, but they've got a commercial expansion, or some need help with industrial expansion, and take it back to the county to be that facilitator for that zone, basically that leader for that zone on the economic development front. Is that what we're talking about here, to kind of be that type of, kind of in a different structure, but same concept? I don't know if it'll be defined specifically by zones throughout the county. I think we came up with 7 zones. I say we, you may not want to take partial credit for the concept, but I know you and I I hope you remember the conversations, but is this kind of where you're leaning towards?
I remember the conversations, and I think that the value of having direct outreach to those entities needs to be part of everybody that does economic development in the department. The ombudsman is not solely responsible for that work. That is the one that is solving problems or directing traffic for folks that are inbound, that have inbound problems. I have a complaint, and I've got somebody to solve it. The ethos, though, is shared, where I want folks within the department to be doing that kind of outbound and outreach. And that's a need.
Because the reason I said that is an example of my district are the 2 buildings in NASA at Fairview Park. Those 2 buildings are sitting vacant. The city's not gaining any income from that. It'd be a great opportunity for this economic development coordinator in this zone to come back to the county and say, hey, the city wants this type of business. Let's go get it. All right, to a bad word here, let's go poach it. Not from within the county, but let's go get it from somewhere else. That's a communication that I don't believe is taking place. And I think it's important because all of our communities have vacant real estate that they'd like to attract a specific or certain type of business or industry. And I think we're missing an opportunity, I believe, with that, and also, as I do, with the Ohio Means Jobs opportunity as well. I think it's low-hanging fruit, and I think we can garner a lot of mileage out of both those activities.
Understood.
The ombudsman sounds as though they're a little bit of a role of a traffic cop, but when you also mentioned that they would be going out to the Rotary and the Kiwanis and places like that, that sounds as though it's also an outreach in the sales and marketing side of that.
I want to make a little bit of clarification. I want everybody in the Department of Economic Development, or in the department that does economic development, to be doing some of that outreach, not just the ombudsman. The ombudsman, they can't be just his or her work. But yes, I hear what you're saying.
Okay. What makes it better to be doing it now than when it was, this is, in theory, it's the same 600 economic development departments that we were trying to circle the wagons around before, and somebody was going to carry that role, and that was one of the roles that Larry Benders was supposed to be doing at the macro level, not the micro individual response stuff, but he was supposed to be carrying that role for the bigger picture coordination with these bigger organizations, Kiwanis, GCP, all that stuff, and it didn't seem to be comfortable. Or because he knew it was an 800-pound gorilla to get everybody on the same page. What makes you think that an ombudsman who is not going to be at the top of the economic development ladder here within this is going to be able to pull it off any more than Larry could have wrestled with it?
Well, perhaps it will also be a priority of the Economic Development Director.
Well, I would hope so, because it's a big challenge.
And if that director is leading that sort of activity and is flanked by the 4 or 5 other folks that are doing economic development in the department, but also has a point of contact that is the fixer, I think that that is a good operational strategy in addition to the work that we're doing in-house. Some of this work that's outbound is good hunting, even if it's not direct. By getting our message out, I think our greatest likelihood for attracting business or helping businesses grow is the conversation that happens between business peers and less from what would happen from the department. So getting that story out so that that story can be repeated by others is going to be a winner for us.
So this will be, again, back to Mr. Greenspan's, this will be something that'll get budgeted, because I assume it's an individual. It could even be more than just an individual. It could be an individual plus a support staff member. So you're looking at 80,000 plus fully loaded out there, plus support staff. So this will be a budgetary item, I assume, the ombudsman.
We had a departure that we're looking to fill, and we changed the job description of that incumbent position to include some of this ombudsman work. So there wouldn't be new additional cost. We'll have to work in the budget about how we do any restructuring, if there's any. But that'll be a different conversation through the budgeting process, if we do it.
Our loss within the department has been more in the outreach, doing work like Mr. Mays. So is that the gap that we have in a slot right now?
No, we had a person leave who was very good at economic development finance, and my hope is that we identify somebody who is also very good at economic development finance and has some additional responsibilities around this ombudsman work. Okay. But the folks that are already in the department, if I can encourage them and direct them where a percentage of their effort is external, then I think that's going to be a good strategy for us.
Do you have a measurement as far as what you're looking for from the ombudsman? I got some ideas as far as your action steps. What are the success goals that are going to be achieved by this person?
Yeah, I don't have those. I have some about what our next steps are. We still have to build a framework around those responsibilities and how they'd be measured.
This is a model that's been done other places, and they've got some measurements that we could look to.
Well, one local one that was advocated was at the City of Cleveland. There was a position that was created specifically for that. COSI had lobbied for it a few years ago and found it to be a success, and so they wanted to see something similar at the county. The responsibilities and the interface of a county with a business are very different than the interface of a business with the city. And so we have to tailor it for the county's roles and where we can have influence.
Okay. Any other questions on that?
The last vertical is new, and it tries to capture some of those activities which we have described separately as community development, but a lot of these things are important to your communities and have an economic development component.
So in theory, all 5 of those could be plum, purple, or should be.
Well, they exist, but we're highlighting them as being part of our economic development strategy. We're acknowledging that place is important, and so our Muni grant program, it has to be integrated with the principles of our economic development strategy. Housing clearly is in that camp, because you need to have high quality places for people to live and work. And the storefront redevelopment program, and that's directly with businesses. These are things that we wanted to make sure were included as part of the economic development plan because they are part of the economic development success of our county.
But you're not going to be driving most of these. These are going to be driven by other departments, or you're going to be driving these?
These are all in the Department of Development now, and I hope to keep them here.
Okay. So sustainability is underneath your department?
No, sustainability is a head nod to some of the work that we do in conjunction with the Sustainability Department. So for example, you might be familiar with the Green Financing Hub that the Department of Sustainability is rolling out. We have proposals from developers that might fit in a particular program around expansion or new construction or others, and then we have some that don't fit. But if we can help facilitate a project to occur and it fits within some of the principles around the sustainability efforts, then we make sure that sustainability is able to do that. So if you had a mixed-use facility that wasn't adding jobs but was creating a good quality place, and we can help create an inducement for that activity through the hub, then we'd want to make sure that we work with our colleagues in sustainability to make that project happen.
Are we doing anything with the funding that was created in the Investment Advisory Board for those funds that would roll into some of these activities that we're talking about, at least at the community level, for loaning back to schools or loaning back to, because those are all jobs and job creators within.
No, sir, we haven't had any
We have
application.
any takers yet, yeah.
Correct.
But does it fit in any of these verticals?
I would say that that's in the, I didn't affirmatively add it there, but it would be among place. Just like a municipal grant program, a lot of the awards are for streets or public facilities. Those are grants. The off-balance sheet lending has not piqued the interest of borrowers, but the kinds of activities that would be eligible would be similar.
Yeah, it looks like it's got a similar portfolio or profile. And we're not talking about having to generate new money. That's $100 million that exists right today that you're not gonna have to tap from some other source. Yep. Mr. Banner.
And I'm just wondering, a lot of this is on, starting up and creating. I'm just wondering about the life-saving aspect. I don't know if, is that part of development?
I know CPR. What do you mean?
Businesses that has some impediment and instead of saving them, or they're going down, I'm just wondering, storefront redevelopment is one area that might be talking about that in this revitalization of businesses. But if we could save a business from going out of business, that would still be creating or saving jobs.
Maybe. A very difficult task would be to prop up a business that was failing. There are instances where we will refi if there's a loan to give a little bit of more leash for loans that we've done with businesses that are in trouble. There are instances where we can provide low-cost loans for businesses that have secured a new customer and they need to fulfill that new customer, but they don't have the capital in place in order to do it. An example is Swift Filters did that. They had a new client in NASCAR, but didn't have the capital to be able to fulfill that need. We're able to provide that capital. Great success story. When I come, or one of my colleagues does, to this committee, it is about growth. And we tell you a story of potential growth. I would not encourage my team to help a business that is going in the wrong direction unless there's an upside potential for growth.
And I have no problem with that philosophy, because we're gonna pick, there's only so many dollars and so much time, and I'd rather pick the folks who are on that upside. It is tough to have tough love, but unfortunately, sometimes you end up throwing good money after bad in a situation like that. Sometimes it's,
I had to ask the question.
yeah, it's all right.
Fair.
Hopefully, I'm not in that category, that Jurgens anytime soon. I don't wanna fall into that. I'll let you continue, and then with the intent that to use a few minutes of your time for addressing what Mr. Miller had written down to.
I will avoid the temptation to summarize and run out the clock. We had some feedback. I'd like to collect additional feedback from this committee. I've been taking notes as you've been giving me feedback. What I'd like to be able to do is share a little bit of Councilman Miller's feedback, and which has been emailed to you. And then next steps after that.
Then you're comfortable with us carrying this over to the next meeting, as opposed to voting it out, then I assume?
This is at your pleasure, Councilman.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure that you were comfortable within the timeline.
Mr. Chair, I'll give modest responses to Councilman Miller's feedback, but in general, he said that there should be some feedback on how the prior action steps, that kind of activity, that should be in the report. I felt it was better served in our presentations, but it is a piece of feedback. Also, one thing is that I accepted as a given the work of steps 1 through 4. They did not include it in the plan, and so speaking to that might be a change that we would consider. Councilman Miller was keenly interested in the work of county planning and some of the place-based work where they recommended highlighting certain places that are primed for growth, and thought that that should be better included in this plan. And how that alignment would be taking place. Some of the feedback that he gave that wasn't written was that he doesn't like the word alignment, and that should be more, we should choose a better approach to articulate what that alignment is, and I think I got some of that feedback today. So that is my very brief summary of his feedback, but it has been shared with you verbatim.
Well, if you can take some of the comments you heard today, and some of which are going to be around budgetary items, some are going to be around cost drivers, some are going to be around action steps, and some are around goals that would spin out. You indicated that you had some of the action steps for some of these initiatives, but you don't necessarily have the goals. When do you anticipate that you'd be setting down the goals? Because that's a little bit of what I'm reading Councilman Miller's and my questions are, as far as so we can have something to measure and say, okay, success, no success, need some help when we come back and look at it with timelines and goals.
Setting specific goals for each individual program is not something that I'm prepared to do. Part of the rationale of this plan for year 5 is that it is a planful year, that we're going to have to be able to set and define what those measures are going to be. And so what I'd like and what we're proposing is that those sorts of things would be defined this year as we're seeking better alignment with those agencies that we don't necessarily control, and then also with the ones that we do here inside the county.
Well, just for example, we have this one of these 3 new pools of funds that you're seeking. We're going to put forth $2 million over a 3-year period of time. It's going to have $8 million coming in from other sources for a total of 10.
Yeah.
when are those dollars supposed to be out there worked? When are they supposed to be collected? What is the timeline that you are anticipating that there'll be an event? Because usually these have an event that they goes on to the next level and somebody else takes these people out. What are we defining as what we want this thing to look like so that we can go ahead and say, okay, we put our $2 million in, it's going in over 3 years. They have to have raised all 10, the total 10 by X, because that's the way these funds work.
Yeah.
And they are either a success or not a success based on that, because the way this whole thing works is a momentum has to take place in order to get that other $8 million. There's not somebody waiting to write that check. And so what are we looking at as far as in our expectation? And are our dollars follow-on dollars after the $8 million is sitting in the bank? Or do we put our one-third? I'm just trying to, I'm not trying to write the plan, I'm just trying to understand what the plan's gonna look like.
Sure. And for those
Because that guy over
individuals,
the other end, he's gonna be asking these questions when it gets to budget.
and we would, not just at budget, but if we do move forward with a contract, we would have those things explicitly both in our contract and prepared to present to council. Part of the RFP approach is that we receive proposals. We know what our proposals are is one thing, but what we get, or what we request for a proposal is one document, but what the proposals that we get from the marketplace are going to be an educational opportunity for us. So we wouldn't want to specify yet what those expectations would be until we have a sense of, one, if we're going to move forward on a contract, two, what are realistic goals and expectations around investments. We want to get that from expertise that is in the marketplace. So we would present that to you before we moved towards an award.
I guess I'm trying to go back, and even to something as simple as the RFP that went out. Did it say that our $2 million comes in before, after, or at the same time? I mean, those are questions that come into funding. Did it say that we are in first position, second position behind every dollar? Are we in parallel, Pansui, that we're both in there together, swimming in the same water? What is it that we set that expectation before somebody came in and said, no, our dollars are always going to come out first, the county's dollars are going to be second one if we get paid back?
Sure.
Because this is not going to come as a shock. These all don't make money.
Sure. Specific to that, it's a loan that has a time, a term, an interest rate, and it's a 7-year term when we expect to be repaid. And so we don't specify things like events. It is a potential that we would get a kind of response from a proposer that would have those details. I can also share with the committee after this meeting all the details of the RFP and what we put out, but it is broad strokes because we want to see what proposals we would get. We don't want to negotiate against ourselves, and we want to see what the marketplace is going to deliver before we would go to contract.
These are most likely existing funds they're going for their next round. Is that what you're envisioning? Somebody that's already been a fundraiser and they have some success of this, or is it somebody that's going to be a newbie that's never raised dollars and they're going to come out and try to raise $8 million?
Qualified proposers will have to have demonstrated a background of success in making investments, but it need not be a nonprofit. It could be for-profit. It could be an existing fund. It could be an existing administrator starting a new fund. Those are the sorts of things that the review committee is going to have to weigh before proposing those to council.
Okay, that'll be very interesting for us to analyze that when it comes up. Any other comments, questions from anybody up here?
Mr. Chair, when we're saying the 5 years, are we talking about 2016? Or what year are we talking about?
It'd be June to June is how it's articulated in the, July to June is how it's articulated in the charter for the terms of the plan.
So it'll be June or
Every year,
July 2015
correct.
for next 5.
Any other comments or questions? We will hold it so we're going to incorporate some of these comments and suggestions, so we'd love to see it, and we'll go from there. Is there any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. Is there anybody else sitting out in the audience that has a public comment unrelated to the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair, no one has signed in.
Okay, and we didn't ask for any miscellaneous business. Mr. Kelly, did you have any miscellaneous business you want to bring forward, Kathy?
No, sir.
I don't think so, okay. We'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for taking a lot of heated questions, but I would have expected nothing less.
I wouldn't like it otherwise.
I didn't say you liked it, but you would have at least expected. Thank you. Nice job.